Hello, Inge.
Hi.
So we decided that we're going to do a short Q&A. I'm going to ask some questions to you about some topics, and then you and all your wisdom are going to connect with source and provide us with the answers.
I'll do my best.
Okay, so we are currently experiencing quite hot weather. Huh? So and sometimes, like for example, you have weather, like a certain mood is associated to a certain type of weather. So like we say that you also have a sunny mood if, yeah, you are happy, and you say that like clouds are gathering above your head if you are like grumpy. So what's the actual connection between that? Is it more than just linguistics, or is there something behind it?
Scientifically, I don't know if it has a scientific base, but I do know that historically, if there's less sunlight, the body reacts to it where it slows down. Many people have trouble feeling happy during long periods of cloud cover, for instance, in the winter. Some people more so than others. And then you have the vitamin D issues, but then you have so it's your whole metabolism. So I think, I don't know from any study, but I think people learn to associate the dark days also with the moons. Also, when we as humanity relied on a situation where we gathered food and prepared for upcoming days just by gathering or farming, etc. You didn't have a grocery store that you could get in the car and drive to. If it was dark weather or bad weather, it was that much harder to find sustenance for yourself, for your family. That's what I think.
Mm-hmm. Is there also like a connection the other way around? So like what you now described is like the weather influences the mood. Does the mood also influence the weather?
Yeah, it's
Oh.
people, but you know, what happens is people remember their body's reaction, and then they share that memory with someone else and someone else and someone else. And then pretty soon the mind takes over, the intellectual mind. And the intellectual mind says, wow, the sun is out. We must be in a good mood because the sun is out, we're happy. Well, then let's define happiness. What makes you say to yourself or others, I'm happy? It's different. What makes you say to others and yourself, I'm joyful? Is there a difference? A lot of this is heavy influence from the intellectual mind.
Okay, so it sounds a bit like the same, like still that weather influences the mood and not the other way around.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
but of course, separate from the biological physical reaction.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
There is a physical reaction with sunlight, but the extreme association, where you say, hey, you have a sunny face because you look
Mm-hmm.
happy. That association comes from the memory. You
No.
can be happy in the wintertime.
Okay, well, actually, this is an interesting answer because, like, there's just the normal, yeah, scientific explanation is the answer. Yeah. Okay, so I have another question. I want to talk about weeds. So, like, not weed in the sense of like psychedelics. I just want to talk about weeds, like the stuff that you actually often remove from your garden, or that you have like because you want to have it as like something to put in your food, or because you use them as a certain type of medicine, herbs or whatever.
Yeah.
So something that somebody once told me is that that what somebody needs starts to grow in their garden. So this was like this came from somebody who worked with a lot of weeds, and she noticed that like whenever somebody had like a certain disease, then in their garden they got like a lot of types of weeds that they didn't want, but which actually were helpful to attack this certain physical problem that they had. So what's going on there? Is there some truth behind this?
There's a little bit of truth, but there's a more logical explanation. The explanation is, let's say you have a problem. Comfrey helps with your problem. Suddenly you start noticing comfrey growing everywhere. Whereas before you might have just removed it and put it in a compost pile.
Mm-hmm. Ah, okay.
You see?
So you start to notice that which you need.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the truth is, there is this universal law of attraction.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But then you're going to energetic levels. In everyday life, the odds are that someone pointed out a particular weed, or you heard it, maybe you didn't even pay attention to it. But your system knows that you need it, so suddenly you start noticing it, such as a common one is dandelion. And then we're running into the Dutch names, smalleweegbree, chamomile, etc. You start noticing these things. The problem where it becomes very unclear, foggy, is when people have heard about things. You know, you go for a lot of people are going for the health benefits of what for a long time people have discarded as weeds. Get rid of them. You don't want them in your lawn. You don't want this. You want that manicured look. Now everybody, not everybody, many people are on the internet making little clips talking about the health benefits. So it makes discernment very difficult. Are you finding them because you heard something about it? Or are you finding them because you are actually expanding your consciousness to allow information that's not really visible or written down to come to you? Are you accepting this information? There's such a flood of literal information that you can find in books, on the radio, on internet, that it becomes difficult for that part of your own consciousness to develop, because you don't know anymore that you need to develop it.
Mm-hmm.
I find myself being trapped. It's like I ask my son or people who are a bit younger than me, hey, could you check this out? Google it. See? So are people just at getting better retrieving documented information? Or are they sensing? I say most people are getting better at retrieving documented information. And it is not their own consciousness that's feeling, I need to be here, or I need to consume this.
So it's like if I'm gardening and I have my tomatoes and I remove like weed that's spontaneously growing there, it's not like I'm for sure removing stuff that should be beneficial for me or whatever.
No.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily so.
But does it also help if I talk to the weed like I'm gonna remove you anyway, please don't grow here? Does that help? Is there some tip that
could it help? Yes. If you're trained enough, if you're developed enough, there's communication with plants.
Okay.
But why ask the weed? Why don't you ask the tomato? If you're going to ask
Tomato
the
to
plant,
remove the weed?
the tomato is what you chose to plant.
Yeah.
The weed was chosen by nature, right? To germinate. So let's first ask the tomato. If you're going to go that direction, ask the tomato, hey, do you think you can get along? If we're talking about communication with plants.
So perhaps sometimes with certain type of plants, I don't need to remove the weeds.
Exactly.
That's an interesting one.
You can look at the health of your tomato or your pepper or whatever else, your carrot. See, and my memory is not that good, but I love companion planting. There's companion planting where their studies have been done, not only attracting beneficial insects, but some vegetables, I'll just name it, some vegetables actually don't do well with other certain vegetables because they put off
there's lots of like synergies and also like
yes,
anti-synergies like between certain. I know that.
It's like the walnut tree. Last year I learned something about walnut trees, that walnut trees in times of stress actually produce a chemical through the roots that if you have fruit trees growing nearby and they're not very strong, it will eventually kill those fruit trees if the walnut trees are stressed. I don't mean stress like you're calling them bad names. I mean, because of the soil conditions.
They're having a difficult time surviving.
Yeah.
And then they just kill plants around them, and then they're doing that.
Yeah. I found it like I was really surprised because I love walnut trees as long as I can remember. And
they're probably quite nice plants as long as they're doing well, but otherwise they become very selfish. Like I don't know.
Yes.
Actually, I now also wanted to go to trees. So and I want to talk about like a tree consciousness. Like if you compare it to like human consciousness or perhaps animal consciousness, it must be quite alien to that. So let me just say some of the things that I heard, and you can then say if it's correct or if you want to deviate from it. Like one of the things I heard is that like the consciousness of a tree is much more spread out in time. Like that their consciousness in the now is more something like which is also protruding 50 years in the past and 50 years in the future. So it's very weird to grasp this type of thing. And also like that tree consciousness is much more intertwined with all trees together.
What was that last sentence, Stefan?
So like that tree consciousness is less individual. That's a way to say it. Like that it's more like if you have some trees next to each other, that they're much more, the consciousness is much more flowing into each other.
Yeah, that happened. I can say that one by through experience. About the time part, that's also true, but it depends on what kind of tree. It depends on many things. So not all trees' consciousness is going to spread from the the past, present, and future. Not all trees. The older the tree, there's genetic memory, just like in human beings. DNA memory. I was in the city, and one of the few times that I'm there, I don't really like being in a city, but I was there and I was waiting for someone to go get the car, and suddenly I felt a pull. I was standing next to a tree and I laid my hand on it. That is not my normal thing to do, by the way. There are people who always like touching trees, kissing trees.
Not like you hug daily your trees in your yard or whatever.
Yeah. But I normally don't make a point of doing this. I put my hand on there And what it was a desperate cry. I didn't want to be there anymore. And I said, wow, not only did that one didn't want to be, there were the same kind of tree. I believe there was no more than 5 on the street. There was no other plant. There were no other plants, no grass, no flowers, nothing. Just these trees in this little square with sidewalk stuff all around them. And it was just an automatic thing. I tuned into that. None of them wanted to be there anymore. They felt abused. They were not in a good environment. I did my best. Didn't know what I was doing, but I tried my best to communicate. They were the only natural living things on the street, and if they left, it would be very, very bad for the atmosphere. Yeah, that day surprised me.
Huh?
So they have a consciousness, but different maybe than ours. But the whole group of them didn't want to be there anymore.
Yeah, so what happened with them? Now we want to hear the end of the story.
Oh, they agreed and decided to stay longer.
Because
But
they
I
could have
don't know
decided to
how
sort
much
of
longer
die.
because I didn't go back.
Yeah.
But
like
maybe they opened the conversation because I didn't like being there either.
Yeah. Have you had this more often, that you communicate with plants either spontaneously or like deliberately?
I think that most of my communication with plants is like somewhere between subconscious and consciousness. I get really happy when I'm working with plants. I get really sad. I'll give you an example. Someone shared some tomato seeds in a tray, and that's normal for people to seed plants in a tray. And then the method usually is you pick out a few that are strong and you discard the rest. I always go seed by seed, which takes much more time. But then I know each seed that wants to germinate and live, it's there, and I don't have too many. And I looked at the tray the next day. I said, nope, not going to pick out just a few bigger ones. I'm going to try to save them all. So I did 41 tomato seeds. I don't need 41 tomato plants. Plus, it's a little bit late, so I'm trying to help them catch up. And Mark asked me, Inga, do you need that many? I said, no, I don't need that many, but I just kind of felt bad just throwing them in the compost. Don't want to do that. Give him a chance. We've got a large yard. So what's happening now, they're all thriving. I expected at least half, 50%, not to make it because they were tiny. Some of them maybe only had one tiny little skinny root. But all 41 are thriving. So we're going to be digging out a lot of holes.
I think I did the same thing last year.
Yes.
I had planted, like, then in the end, a lot of tomatoes way too close to each other. So like it was, we had so many tomatoes. It was just impossible to keep up. And like when you were picking tomatoes, there was this forest of tomato plant, like, and yeah, and then just trying to get all the tomatoes out of there was almost impossible, let alone if you like go for a week.
Yes. And tomatoes like air, otherwise you have to be very careful you don't start mildews and stuff. And they're still tiny because it's very late in the season. They need a growing season, but you know, I thought I'd give them a chance.
So we'll see how it goes. Perhaps we come back later, so like then we have then there's at least like some sequential stuff happening in the channel.
Yeah, I know one way or the other, if I put them in the ground, they will still help the soil because this is only last year I started working the soil. It was neglected for 16 years.
Yeah.
So they still are part of the whole. Doesn't matter if I don't harvest tomatoes. It's so that is my type of communication / understanding with plants.
I wanted to ask something more about like trees and tree consciousness. Huh? So like
Yeah.
we humans think very individual, like I am me and you are you, and this is all very clear. But sometimes like you have a tree or you have actually two trees, which apparently like have the same root. And so it's actually one tree that's split in the beginning and two branches or whatever. And also what you sometimes have is like, especially with certain types of tree, like the Dutch word is a wilg. Do you know the American word for it, the English word?
Willow.
Willow, oh yeah, sure, yeah. Okay, so if you have a willow, if you like cut branches off and you throw them somewhere, very often they take root and like then there's like a willow, not tree, but like bush coming out of it. And that sort of when I found it out like a few years ago, I thought it was really weird. Like, which tree is it? Like, if I cut a branch of that tree, or if I cut this tree down, and then you have several trees coming out of its trunk, and like, who is it? Who, or is there a who, or is this too restrictive to think about it like that?
There is no who. What it is that even a very small twig of a willow has enormous amount of growth hormones. I planted a willow because I like starting little, cuttings and stuff. And I like to help little plants that are struggling a little bit. And it's just part of what I really enjoy doing. So if you take it and you take cuttings from the willow, the water absorbs a lot of the growth hormones. So how should I say it? If you'd taken a twig from the willow and put it in the ground and trimmed it, it would end up developing into a tree. It only looks like a bush. Even though it looks like a bush, it has the building blocks of a tree. It's just trying to survive the best it can by throwing out a lot of branches. You see? And there's many types of willows, but I took the regular one.
Yeah, but like I want to go back to the question actually, if that's okay. Like,
okay,
unless there's something interesting to say about your particular willow.
No.
Like, because I want to like go into the direction like there's many people, like especially like I used to be, who think like in boxes of like consciousness. Huh? So what is the consciousness of willows, or what is
the consciousness specifically of a willow or of
yeah
tree?
I take this one as an example because there you can clearly see like if you cut one tree into two pieces, then you get several trees. So like yeah,
they're not singular. Human
like
beings think singular. That's what the huge problem is. Not only trees, but bushes, shrubs, vegetation, they are very, very close to original blueprint. Let's not talk about GMOs.
I don't know what GMO
because they're all genetically modified stuff.
Okay, yeah.
They're all confused. But if you take normal plants that you find in nature, they are not for the individual.
Okay. So like
you can go back to the walnut tree because then you say, well, why does it put off poison? Well, it's a food source. So it again isn't just protecting itself, it's protecting all that needs its fruit.
Okay.
I think people are the only things walking around on Earth that are really, really obsessed with individuality.
That's an interesting thought.
Well, I think it's a sad thought, but yeah, I imagine people would think it's interesting.
I don't know. Why is it sad? Why is individuality sad?
Because you're denying the whole.
But can't you be individual and not deny the whole?
Yeah. You could be an individual, but if that is your main focus, then it
But
causes
like all humans, that's the main focus, right?
what?
All humans, that's the main focus.
That's humans' main focus.
Mhm.
But that's not the main focus. The main
Okay.
focus is life with capital L. We are only a very small, if you take all of humanity, 8 billion people, we're only a drop in the ocean. So what is an individual? Nothing. Everything and nothing at the same time.
That's an interesting one to perhaps someday come back to. But like, I wanted to try to make the video not too long.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
shall we, anything else you want to add about like plants or whatever we discussed?
About what?
Plants or which we discussed.
Yeah, but we should make another video because if people recognize how much healing they can receive just from plants, not even the ingestion, but plants work very hard. That would be a nice little talk, and maybe somebody would be triggered into investigating. And if you don't have a yard, get a few pots on your balcony.
Well, then I suggest that like next week there will be another video follow-up on this. And then we stop for now. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.